Today we will see the topic mechanics of respiration. So in it we'll mainly see how our lungs expand and relax and what are the mechanics exhibited by the respiratory muscles in the different phases of respiration. So as we know, there are two phases, inspiration and expiration. So we will see what are the respiratory muscles involved in it. So first we'll see the respiratory movements. In respiratory movements, first we will see the respiratory muscles. So respiratory muscles, there are two types. First one, which is used in inspiration, second in expiration. Okay. So now in inspiration, we have two types of muscles, primary and accessory. In expiration also, primary and accessory. So what are the primary muscles? The primary muscles are external, external intercostal muscles and diaphragm. Okay, so the primary inspiratory muscles are external intercostal muscles and the diaphragm. So external intercostal muscles are supplied by these are supplied by the intercostal nerve. Okay, the intercostal nerves which are T1 to T11. So the thoracic nerve from T1 to T11, and diaphragm is supplied by the phrenic nerve, that is C3 to C5, a cervical nerve from C3 to C5. Now, what are the accessory muscles? So the accessory muscles are sternocleidomastoid, scalene, pectorals, and anterior serratile. Okay. So these many muscles are involved. So inspiratory muscles are of two types, primary and accessory. Primary is your external intercostal and diaphragm. External intercostal muscle is supplied by your intercostal nerve T1 to T11, the thoracic nerve, and diaphragm by phrenic nerve C3 to C5. And the accessory muscles are sternocleidomastoid, scalene, pectorals, anterior serratile. Okay. And it also has the elevator nerve, scapula. It also has the elevator of scapula. So these were the inspiratory muscles. Now we'll see what are the expiratory muscles. So expiratory muscles, these are also two types, primary and accessory. So the primary and the accessory. So the primary are your intercostals. Okay, the intercostal muscles. These are also supplied by the intercostal nerves, and the accessory muscles are the abdominal muscles. Okay, these are your abdominal muscles, like recti abdominis. Okay, so expiratory muscles are of two types, primary and accessory. Primary are intercostal, and accessory are your abdominal muscles like rectus abdominis. Okay, so now the second part, that is movement in thoracic cage. Okay. So in respiratory movements, first is the movements in what are the muscles which are involved in the respiration, inspiration and expiration. Now we will see the movements in the thoracic cage. So the movements in the thoracic cage, they differ in inspiration and expiration. So there is when we inspire, there is an enlargement of the thoracic cavity, and when we expire, there is the shrinkage of the thoracic cavity. So these movements, they are regulated by four structures, four main components, and they are thoracic lid, upper costal series, lower costal series, and lastly diaphragm. So these things decide the movements in the thoracic cage. Okay. So what is the thoracic lid? Thoracic lid is the uppermost portion of the thoracic cage. Like we can imagine this thoracic cage as a barrel or drum. Okay. So this upper lid or the closing can be your thoracic lid. The last portion can be your diaphragm, and we divide this into two parts. The upper part will be your upper costal, and lower part will be your lower costal. Okay, so this thoracic lid starts from our first vertebra. Okay, sorry, first rib. It starts from our first rib. So this is your thoracic lid. Okay, so the thoracic lid comprises of first rib plus your manubrium sternum. Okay, what is manubrium sternum? Our sternum is like this. So this topmost portion is your manubrium. Then this is your body, and this is the zippy sternum. So we have three parts in the sternum. So this part is your manubrium sternum. Okay, it is attached to the both sides with the ribs. So this thoracic lid, what is that? It is your first rib plus manubrium sternum. So it is also known as thoracic operculum. It is also known as thoracic operculum. Operculum, it is nothing but opening. Okay. So opening also we call it as operculum. This is a thoracic opening. So thoracic lid, first rib and manubrium sternum. Now the upper costal series. So upper costal series, what is that? It is the ribs from second to the sixth. Okay, so the second to the sixth pair of ribs is known as the upper costal series. Okay, now how they assess in the movements in the thoracic cage? It has two types of movements. Okay, let's see what are the two types of movement. Okay, so this upper costal series have two types of movement. One is your bucket handle movement, and the next one is a palm handle. Okay, so these two types of movement are exhibited by your upper costal series. First one is palm handle movement. Next one is your bucket handle movement. Now what are these? Palm handle movement, as you can imagine, it is the vertical. It is in the vertical direction, and bucket handle is in the transverse or horizontal direction. So palm handle, what will it cause? It will cause the vertical displacement of our thoracic cage, and bucket handle will got the transverse displacement of our thoracic cage. Okay. So what happens in bucket handle movements? is that there will be the contraction of the external intercostal muscles. Okay, the intercostal muscles that we saw in the respiratory muscles, there will be the contraction of those muscles, and because of that, what will happen? There will be the elevation of these ribs. These second to sixth ribs will elevate, and thus there will be the forward and outward movement of the sternum. Okay, so what are the things? Contraction of the external intercostal muscles. Okay, second, elevation of these ribs. Third, there will be the outward and forward movement of sternum. Okay, so what is happening here is that there is a contraction of the external intercostal muscles, which will causing this ribs to move upward. There is elevation of these ribs, and that's why a thoracic cage is going outward and forward. Okay, so what it will do, that it will increase our thoracic cavity. Okay, now in bucket handle movement, what is happening? The central portion, or arch. Okay, central portion or the arch of the ribs will increase. So our ribs are like this. This is your sternum and this is your ribs. So this is the arch or the central portion in the ribs. This will increase, and this will increase the transverse or the horizontal diameter of our thoracic cavity. Okay, so these two types of movement are executed by the upper costal series during the course of respiration. Okay, so now what are the lower costal series? These are your 7 to 10 ribs. Okay, from it ends in 6, then from lower it starts from 7 to 10. Okay, now these are your lower costal series, 7th to 10th pair of ribs. Okay, now what does it do? It only shows the bucket handle movement. Okay, it shows the bucket handle movement, and it does what it will do. It will increase the transverse diameter. Okay, it will increase the transverse diameter of the thoracic cavity. That is the lower costal series. The lastly, the diaphragm. Okay, now what diaphragm will do? It will increase the vertical diameter. Okay, it will increase the vertical diameter of the thoracic cavity. Okay, that is why inhaling and exhaling, it will change its shape, and according to that, it will adjust with the air in the thoracic cavity. So, what are the things we saw in the movements of the thoracic cage? These are your thoracic lid, upper costal series, lower costal series, and the diaphragm. Thoracic lid is made by the first rib and the manubrium sterni, and it will increase the vertical diameter of the thoracic cavity. In upper costal series, it is made up of second to sixth pair of ribs, and it shows two types of movement: pump handle and bucket handle movement. The pump handle movement will increase the will cause an outward and forward movement of the sternum, and bucket handle will increase the transverse diameter of the thoracic cavity uh, because of the central portion or the arch of ribs. And next, in the lower costal series, it is made up of 7 to 10 pair of ribs, and will increase the transverse diameter of the thoracic cage because of the bucket handle movement. In the diaphragm, it will increase the vertical diameter of the thoracic cage. Okay. Uh, okay. So this was the movements in the thoracic cage. Now we will see the movements of the lungs. Okay. Third thing is the movement of lungs. So we will see what how the lungs move in our thoracic cage. So as I already told, what happens that when we inspire, there will be the negative pressure which is created in our thoracic cavity because of the enlargement of the thoracic cavity. Okay, when we inspire, the thoracic cavity enlarges, and which will cause an increase in the negative pressure inside the thoracic cavity. Okay, so lungs. First, we will see that lungs has something called as collapsing tendency. Okay, there is a collapsing tendency of the lungs. What is that? That during respiration and even in resting conditions, the lung will tend to collapse or shrink. Suppose you can imagine a spring which is stretched. So what will happen when you release it? It will go to its normal position. So this is the same case with lungs, that uh, even in resting condition, it is in a stretched state. So if that means if some of the factors which causes this prevent the collapsing tendency, and if it doesn't happen, what will happen that if the factors which prevent this collapsing tendency are not present, then the lungs will collapse to its original position and it will shrink. Okay, so this is the collapsing tendency which is present even during resting condition. Okay, even when we are not breathing, then also this collapsing tendency is present. Now, second, what are the factors which cause these collapsing tendencies? Okay, so the factors causing this collapsing tendency. Okay, now there are mainly two factors. First is your intrapleural pressure. Intrapleural pressure. Second is surface tension. Okay, so these two factors lead to the collapsing tendency of the lungs. Now, what is intrapleural pressure? It is nothing but a negative pressure. Negative pressure exerted by the intrapleural fluid which is present in the intrapleural cavity. What is intrapleural pressure? We have seen that there are two layers of pleura, and in between that layers there are fluid is present, intrapleural fluid, and because of that fluid, it exerts a negative pressure, and due to that negative pressure, what has happened is that there will be a collapsing tendency of the lungs. Okay, so what it does is that it exhibits a phenomena of recoil. The lungs exhibit a phenomena of recoil. That is it has a recoiling tendency. Okay, it shows a constant recoiling tendency. Now, what is surface tension? Okay, surface tension is the tension exerted by the fluid on alveolar membrane. Okay, what is surface tension? It is a tension exerted So what this causes the collapse of the lungs. Now, third is what are the factors which will prevent this collapsing tendency? Okay, so factors preventing this collapsing tendency of the lungs. So mainly there are two factors which prevent the collapsing tendency. These are okay. So now we'll see that. Yeah. So what are the factors which prevent the collapsing tendency? This is your surfactant. Okay, mainly it is your surfactant. So what is surfactant? Surfactant is nothing but a fluid which prevents a surface tension. Okay, so because of this surfactant, what happens that the lungs don't collapse. Okay, so now we will see the surfactant in detail. Okay, so what is the surfactant? It is nothing but the fluid which prevents the which decreases the surface tension. Yeah, surfactant's function is to decrease the surface tension. So if anybody asks how it prevents the collapsing tendency, it's by decreasing the surface tension. So surfactant is a fluid which prevents the friction between the two layers of pleura. It is a fluid which decreases the surface tension, and it is a fluid which prevents the collapsing tendency of the lungs. So now we will see from where it is formed. Okay, we have already discussed the formation or the secretion. Secretion, so surfactant, it is secreted from the, as we know, we have seen in the first chapter, it is secreted from the type 2 alveolar cells. Okay, type 2 alveolar cells. These are the types of alveoli, and which are also known as pneumocytes. Okay, so it is secreted from type 2 alveolar cells. Also, it is secreted from the Clara cells. Now, what are these Clara cells? These cells are present in the bronchioles. Okay, so it is secreted from two types of cells: type 2 alveolar cells or the pneumocytes, and the Clara cells in the bronchioles. Now, we have seen the secretion, so we will see the components or the chemistry. The chemistry of the surfactant, that is, what are the components which are present in the surfactant. So it is mainly a lipoprotein complex. Okay, a lipoprotein complex. So as you can see from the name, lipo means a lipid, and protein means protein. So in addition to this, it also has phospholipids plus and some ions. Okay, so what are the components of the surfactant? These are your lipid, protein, phospholipids, and some ions. So what are these things specifically? We'll see. So in lipids, it is mainly made up of TAG. TAG is nothing but your triacyl glycerides. Okay, the form of acids. So TAG and phosphoglycerols. Okay, so the lipid component in it are TAGs and the phosphoglycerol. Now the protein component. So it is made up of 4 proteins: SPA, SPC, SPC, and SPD. These are the 4 components. This is nothing but the surfactant protein A, B, C, and D. Okay. Phospholipids. Phospholipid is one main thing. DPPC. It is an important thing to remember. So what is DPPC? It is dipalmityl phosphatidyl choline. Okay. DPPC is your dipalmityl phosphatidyl choline. It is a phospholipid, and it is present in your surfactant. And lastly, the ions are your calcium ions. Okay. Calcium ions. So, surfactant is a lipoprotein complex. It has lipid, protein, phospholipids, ions. Lipid is triglycerides, TAG, phosphoglycerols. Protein are your SPA, B, C, and D. Phospholipids is your DPPC, dipalmityl phosphatidyl choline, and ions is your calcium ions. Okay. So now we will see from where it is secreted, okay, or the formation from where it is happening. So the formation of surfactant takes place in the, it is in the form of myelin. It is in the form of tubular myelin. Okay, it is in the form of tubular myelin. What is this tubular myelin? It is nothing but a meshwork of lipids and protein. Okay, it is a meshwork of lipids and protein in the form of tubular myelin. So surfactant is produced in the form of tubular myelin. It is a meshwork of lipids and proteins. So now we'll see what are the functions. So as we already know what are the functions, but still let's summarize it here. So what are the functions? So we need 4 functions. It decreases the surface tension, as we have already discussed. So it decreases the collapsing tendency of the lungs. Second, it stabilizes the alveoli. It stabilizes the alveoli. Okay. It prevents its shrinkage. Okay. Third one is your inflation. Inflation after birth. Okay. And lastly, defense against infection. Okay. So these are your most 4 main functions: decreasing the surface tension, thus decreasing the collapsing tendency of the lung. It stabilizes the alveoli. Inflation of lungs. Inflation of lungs after birth. So what happens that it is secreted after some months after birth, and it causes the lungs. It prevents a collapsing tendency in the lungs, but immediately after birth, it also helps in uh, inflating the lungs. Okay, and lastly, the defense mechanism. So it has some defense cells which acts against the infection or the inflammatory particles. So now what is the deficiency? Okay, so it is the last thing in surfactant. What will happen if there's a deficiency of surfactant in your lungs? So it will cause a disease, a condition known as ARDS, that is acute respiratory distress syndrome. Okay, so a condition known as acute respiratory distress syndrome. Why it happens? Because of deficiency of the surfactant in your lungs, and it is mainly of 2 types, juvenile and adults, which you will study later. So these are the things we'll see in surfactant. Now I have a question for you. You have to tell me that after how many months the surfactant starts to secrete after birth. Okay, after birth, how many months the surfactant starts to secrete after birth. Okay, this you have to tell me in the comment section. Okay, so now next topic is your respiratory pressures. So till the respiratory movements. So now we will see the respiratory pressures. So what are the respiratory pressures? We'll see here. There are mainly 2 types of respiratory pressures. So in respiratory pressure, so the second topic we'll see the respiratory pressures. So there are mainly 2 types of pressure. They are intrapleural pressure and your intra-alveolar pressure. Okay, intrapleural pressure is also known as intrathoracic pressure, and intraalveolar pressure is also known as intrapulmonary pressure. Okay, so intrapleural pressure is also known as intrathoracic, means the pressure outside the lung, and intraalveolar, intrapulmonary. Pulmonary is a lung, so it is inside the lungs. So we will see what does intrapleural. Intrapleural, what are the functions? Oh, okay. So what is it? It is a negative pressure. Okay. So mainly it is a negative pressure, while the intraalveolar pressure on inspiration it is negative, but while on expiration it is positive. Okay. So on inspiration it is negative, but on expiration it is positive. So we'll see what are the significance of this pressure. So first, it helps to keep the lung inflated. Okay, means it helps to keep the lung inflated. Second, it is known as the respiratory pump for venous return. Okay, it is known as a respiratory pump for venous return. Why? Because what it does, it pulls the venous blood from the lower parts of the body and pumps it to the heart. Okay, that's why it is known as a respiratory pump for venous return. And intra-alveolar pressure, what it does is that it first it is helpful in the exchange of gases between alveoli and blood. Okay, it is helpful in the exchange of gases exchange of gases between alveoli and blood, and also it helps in the transfer of air. Okay, it helps in the transfer of air in and out of alveoli. So what are the two functions? Exchange of gases between alveoli and blood, and also it helps in exchange of air in and out of alveoli. So these are the two main functions of two main pressures in the respiratory pressures. So now we'll see a small curve. Okay, so let's take it as 0. This will be your lung volumes, and this will be your pressures. Okay, so I depict the pressure in this curve. Okay. So this will be your inspiration, expiration, then inspiration. So by plotting the intrapleural curve, we'll get something like this. Okay, we'll get a curve like this, and when plotting the intrapulmonary pressure, we'll get a curve like this. This is your intrapleural. This is your intrapulmonary. Okay, so as okay, sorry. This is your intrapulmonary and this is your intrapleural. So as we know, intrapleural always remains negative. It is a negative pressure, so it is below 0 all the time. And intrapleural, it becomes positive on inhalation and negative on inhalation, exhalation. So take from so yeah. So on expiration, this becomes negative. The expiration becomes negative. So, and we can also see that pulmonary pressure is the highest on inspiration, is the highest during the mid of expiration. Okay, and it is the intrapleural pressure. It is highest on the end of expiration, and it is the lowest on the end of inspiration. Okay, So now we will see another topic, that is compliance. Okay. So what is compliance? Okay, compliance is nothing but the expandability of the lungs and thorax. It is the expandability of the lungs of thorax, that is how much they are going to expand, will be determined by the compliance of lung. Okay, and there are many conditions in which there is a decrease of the compliance, that is the lungs will not be able to expand properly. So it is also a measure of the stiffness of the lungs. Okay, that how stiff the lungs are, it is measured by the compliance. Now, it is also of two types. One is a static and one is a dynamic. So it is nothing but static is measured when there is no breathing. Okay, it is measured in resting condition, and dynamic is when there is a breathing. So static compliance means the expandability of lungs when there is no breathing, or when the lungs is in resting condition, and in dynamic, the expandability is measured when there is breathing. Okay. Now there are some pathological conditions. Okay. So pathological as well as physiological condition in which this compliance is changed. So that we'll see in applied physiology. Okay. So what are the conditions when the compliance will increase, and what are the conditions when the compliance will decrease? Okay. So it increases in old age, in physiological condition, that is normally a person ages normally. So it is a normal physiological condition when the compliance will decrease. Sorry. Okay, so in old age, the compliance will decrease, and in pathological conditions like emphysema, the compliance will decrease. Okay, that is expandability of the lungs will decrease in this condition. Now, what are the conditions which can cause an increase in compliance? They are deformities of the thorax, like kyphosis and scoliosis. Now, what are these conditions, kyphosis and scoliosis? In scoliosis, the spine that should be like this, the spine will be like this, curved structure. And in kyphosis, there will be a hunched back. Okay. Normally, the person's spine will be a normal curve, but this curve will increase. This curve will increase, and this causes the condition which is called as kyphosis, and this can increase the compliance. Okay. And next is your pleural effusion, fibrotic pleurisy, paralysis of respiratory muscles, and lastly, abnormalities in the thorax, like hydrothorax, pneumothorax, pyothorax, and hemothorax. So, what are the conditions in which it increase? These are deformities of the thorax, like kyphosis, scoliosis, pleural effusion, that is when there is a increase in the intrapleural fluid, and fibrotic pleurisy, and paralysis of the respiratory muscles, and the abnormalities in the thorax, like the hydro, pneumo, pyo, and the hemothorax. So the last topic we will see now, that is the work of breathing. Okay, now before going to that, I'll just show a curve how the compliance will vary. This will be a lung volume. This will be the intrapleural pressures. So normally the compliance will be like this. Okay, the curve will be like this. But in emphysema, where the compliance increases, sorry, in conditions like the pleural effusion, where the compliance increases. Then the curve will be like this, fusion, effusion, and this is the normal compliance. And in cases where the compliance increases, the curve will be like this, right? In pricing. Okay, so this is the curve. So the last topic is the work of breathing. Work of breathing. So what is the work of breathing? It is nothing but the work done by the your respiratory muscles to overcome the resistance that is offered by the lungs and the thorax. What is work of breathing? It is the work done by the respiratory muscles to overcome the resistance offered by the lungs and the thorax. Okay, so mainly there are three types of work. First is your airway resistance work. Second is your compliance work. And third is your tissue resistance work. Okay. So what is airway resistance? It is nothing but the resistance offered by our airway or the respiratory tract. So to overcome that, our respiratory muscles have to do some work, and that is your airway resistance work. What is compliance work? So as we know, compliance work is due to the elastic property of the lungs. Okay, elastic property of the lungs. What is that? So as we have already discussed that lungs have an elastic property to recoil. Okay, due to that, to keep the lungs in the extended position or the normal position to prevent it from collapsing, this work done by the respiratory muscles or the energy expenditure which is done by the respiratory muscles is known as a compliance work. Now, what is tissue resistance work? It is also known as non-compliance or non-viscous. Second, it is the non-elastic viscous resistance work. It is also known as non-elastic viscous resistance work, that is, which is not due to the property of any elastic property of the lungs or thorax, but it is due to the resistance which is caused by the tissues of the lungs and the thorax. Okay, the resistance caused by the tissues in the lungs. So this is the tissue resistance work. Okay, so if we plot it in a graph, it will be like this. This is your lung volume. Okay, these are your pressures. So this whole thing will be your compliance work. This one will be your airway resistance work, and this one will be your tissue resistance work. Okay, so the work of breathing, what is that? The work done by the respiratory muscles to against the resistance of the lung and thorax. What are they? Airway resistance, compliance work, and the tissue resistance work. So this is the end of discussion here. So in the next class, we'll see the ventilation topic. Until then, I have a last question for you. Okay. Yeah. So you have to tell me what is the what are the tissue which are involved in the tissue resistance work. So you can comment on the comment section below. So till then, take care and bye.